Good afternoon in the east, and good morning if you are in Hawaii. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. Hurricane outlook and discussion time. First, Hurricane Lane. And looking at the satellite animation, what a strange looking appearance, to be sure. This is what happens when the shear starts to interact with the tropical cyclone, and strange things start to happen. It becomes more rounded. You don't see the banding features as much. It's hard to even detect much rotation, the counterclockwise rotation. So the structure has changed. It's trying to decouple, meaning that the mid and upper levels of the energy would be pushed off this way, while the low-level center would eventually decouple from everything and turn off to the west like this. That's just an example. And we'll just have to see how that process unfolds. I am not too worried about wind for any of these islands of any particular intensity. Like hurricane conditions, going to be rare to see those. So, tropical storm conditions, 40 miles per hour or higher. There's going to be some gusts. There'll be some gusts to hurricane force, but mainly on the higher elevations of any of these islands at best. So I'm not as concerned about this being a wind event. The waves and some surge run up, especially on the south-facing beaches where the onshore flow would take place. That could be an issue. But then, of course, it's the heavy rainfall that we've been talking about, and that is still a possibility. If we look at the sea surface temperatures in and around the Hawaiian Islands, 27 Celsius, so about 81 degrees Fahrenheit. So there's plenty of ocean heat content to generate a lot of convection and rainfall. The convection is that upward motion, that pulsing that you see in this satellite picture. That's the thunderstorms and the upward cloud formation. We call that convection, and that leads to very, very heavy rainfall. And we can see that rain on the mosaic here, the composite of all the different radars in the Hawaiian Island chain region. I'll zoom in for you here. You notice the big islands still inundated with a few bands of rain from time to time. And with the elevations over here, the orographic lift, where the air literally gets to stream up and squeezed out over those taller volcanic peaks, yes, you're going to see higher rain totals, exaggerated here. Truthful, but I'm saying they're exaggerated compared to other areas where the land is flatter, relatively speaking, where you don't have 13,000-foot peaks. And so Maui and all the way over towards Oahu here, and the islands in between out towards Kauai even, maybe a little bit of a rain band heading in your direction. But the heaviest, and this is what I want to show here, is still offshore, and with Lane only moving generally northward at about 5 miles per hour, you can walk that fast if you really hoof it. And so you could outrun Lane. And so this is a slow-moving system, and the rainfall is just going to add up. How much and for which locations, it is hard to say. Generally speaking, the windward side of these islands would take the most rainfall, as you could imagine, and then the leeward side probably in sort of a rain shadow. But we'll just have to see if any of these, what's left of these bands, rotate around across the leeward sides. It's just very complicated. So the bottom line is, if you're off work or out of school, etc., for this, sit at home. Don't venture out, especially if it really starts to rain hard. Gusty winds and heavy rain don't mix very well. So just, if you're already off, I know some people have to work, but just don't be out and about unless you have to for work-related stuff, just to be safe, okay? Some gusty winds could knock a tree branch down or something else, and you might not be ready for it, and you have all kinds of problems. So it's going to unfold over the next 24 to 48 hours, the sort of the finale here. I'm not too concerned about hurricane conditions per se, as I am the rain. But even that might not end up being as catastrophic as we thought. But that still is yet to be seen, because this is a slow-moving system. So there's really not much more advice that I can give you, or information, or what-if scenarios. People in the Hawaiian Islands are, they're still flying in. I heard a plane go by just a minute ago. I'm in Oahu over here, and they're still flying into Honolulu. So it's not that bad yet, depending on where you are. Look at it that way. All right, as far as the rest of the update here, in the Atlantic, nothing going on at the moment. They got rid of the possibility of development, but we're going to look more at the Atlantic in just a moment. In the eastern Pacific, outside of Hurricane Lane, which is in the central Pacific, this one area well to the south and west of Mexico and the Baja Peninsula, 50% chance of development, but nothing else. And the string of good luck for the Pacific coast here will continue, with nothing forecast to develop over the next several days. So that's great news for the resort areas of Pacific Mexico. Now, looking at the Atlantic Basin, still very quiet overall. Things are slowly changing. As I'll show you in a moment, water temperatures out throughout this region have definitely warmed from where they were before. They're just only ever so slightly below the long-term average, and probably a little less than a degree Celsius cooler than this time last year. And a degree Celsius doesn't sound like much, but if you turned your bath water up 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius, and when you're talking about 1 degree, it doesn't really matter much. You wouldn't notice it, but energy in that much heat in the ocean is noticed, and that it is slightly cooler than average, but almost a degree cooler than last year, it does make a big difference out in the tropical Atlantic, because it leads to less overall instability out through this region, a little bit higher surface pressures, and that's all it takes to kind of keep things down, if you know what I'm saying. So nothing to worry about over the next several days in the Atlantic. A look at the eastern Pacific and the system well to the south and west of the Baja here, and a pretty active overall sort of monsoon trough, intertropical convergent zone, but nothing seeming to generate along that grapevine, so to speak, of all that convection down there. Now I want to show you the precipitable water in the Atlantic Basin as we look at how things are changing. More moisture coming off, less dust, less dry air. This would represent the drier air, and it's much farther to the north. And as we end the month and get into September, it's pretty much unanimous that the modeling is indicating the sinking regime in the Atlantic to change over to a rising regime, a rising pattern. Sounds like, the change of the loss of a king and the rise of another or whatever. But in this case, the air is what I'm trying to say here. The sinking air, which you can't see on any of these charts. It's hard to see sinking air, but that's what's been really holding the Atlantic back. Sinking air that's dry, and that's going to change. It's almost a certainty from what I have been looking at. And here, the main development region is definitely warmer than it was at the start of the season, and it's warmer than it was in July. Nowhere near what it was last year. And that's not even accurate. Last year, it was just a little bit warmer, but that's those tiny half a degree Celsius, 3/4, a full degree, really does matter when you're talking about energy in the ocean, and that's a whole different subject. You can have a whole lecture about the thermodynamics and how much energy is contained in a cubic mile of water or whatever. That's beyond the scope of this discussion. Bottom line, the Atlantic Basin overall is fairly warm. There's no really cold areas relative to average, so that's not going to be a inhibiting factor any longer. A little bit of evidence of El Nino kind of trying to pop up here in the Pacific, but you've got this rather large expanse of colder anomalies that have shown up. And here's Hawaii. Water temperatures around the islands slightly warmer than the long-term average. All right, looking real quick at actual temperatures, I like to track this. Put the contour version up where you can see the lines of what are called isotherms drawn in for me. So 30 degrees Celsius that stands out. Very large area all throughout the Gulf of Mexico here in the Central Gulf, ready for something to come along. So we cannot just dismiss, hey, we're not having anything in August. Well, that is great news, because a year ago today we were having something in August. We remember that. Harvey. Nothing like that right now, but that doesn't mean that it won't happen. So anyhow, if you like going to the beach, the water temperatures are certainly, well, they might even be too warm for you. It just depends on your taste. In the Atlantic, it's interesting that the 26 Celsius line right here, that's about 79.5 Fahrenheit, has retreated quite a bit. It was much closer to Long Island up here, but it has retreated, and now water temps near Long Island are about 22, 23 Celsius, so mid-70s. I like it much warmer than that, and when I get back home to Wilmington here this weekend, hopefully Sunday, I'll be able to head to the beach Monday, maybe after I pick the kids up from school Monday afternoon, and water temperatures are still very nice, in the very low 80s, maybe 80, 81 degrees, depending on, and that of course is Fahrenheit, where you are. All right, so just real quick, stop it and start it over. The next 5 days in the Atlantic Basin, just to show you, really nothing coming off the coast of Africa out here. Bermuda high pressure generally in control. Nothing coming out of the Caribbean. No impulses headed towards the windwards or leewards. In fact, it'll probably be a little drier than average through there over the next several days. And that's it. That's good news there. So, Lane, we're waiting. 5 miles per hour, it's moving. It's becoming annoying because it was just bumped the lampshade, sorry. I talk with my hands even though you don't see me at the moment. Bumped the lamp here on the desk. Almost knocked it over. People are going to get impatient. I'm just going to end with this. With it moving so slow, they're going to be like, well, where's all this hurricane stuff I've heard about? And all the hoopla about it. Well, remember this. 2 things. It's still coming. It is weakening from a wind perspective. That's 2 things there. So I'll add one more and make it 3. The probabilities of things happening are what you have to remember. It was never a certainty that a category whatever hurricane was going to plow through Hawaii. Nobody ever forecast that, at least not officially. What is going to happen, heavy rain, that's already happened, the increase in wind, some power outages, and just an overall disruption of everyday life. What might happen is a tremendous amount of rain for certain locations, impossible to know. So on that basis, like I said earlier, just remain home, catch up on Netflix binging, whatever, and stay off the roads if you can, and by 48 hours from now, hopefully things will be looking up. I will be out and about later today. Speaking of staying put, I have work to do. I've got one more camera I need to set up along the canal there near Waikiki in downtown Honolulu, and then just kind of figure out where I can monitor things from my vehicle the safest. Obviously, I don't have to worry about surge. I'm not going near the water with the big waves or whatever. I might try to find somewhere to get some video and just kind of be a roaming reporter, if you will. And I will post stuff on Twitter and the occasional 90-second YouTube video. And hopefully, when conditions warrant, I'll go live on YouTube for as long as needed. All right, that's the game plan for today. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks for tuning in. I do appreciate it. From Oahu and the beautiful islands of Hawaii, I will have more for you probably later tonight.